the word of the Lord.
Our first reading for this Sunday is taken from the second book of Samuel. I propose that we reflect on focusing on Jesus. This is the last Sunday of Advent. In a few days, we shall commemorate the birth of Jesus. Now, who is Jesus? I know some of you will say, isn't it obvious? But, it is, I think, worthwhile to be asked that question over and over again so that we could be reminded, yes, this Jesus needs to be known over and over again. In the first reading, we find a King David who has just won the battle against his enemies. What a relief! What a joy! And now was the time to enjoy the spoils of war, as it were, his benefits after the conquest. He lives now in a beautiful palace made of cedar. And the goodness of David emerges, realizing how comfortable his life has been after the victory. He also realized that he, the human king, lives in a palace, whereas the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God among his people, is living in a simple tent. And look at the decency of David. He made it known to the prophet Nathan his desire, his project to construct a more fitting house for the Ark of the Covenant. We salute David. We salute his human, kingly project. And Nathan thought, yes, it was good. But then God spoke to the prophet Nathan, and God made known to David his plan. God first of all reminded David, you want to construct a house for me? Well, do you recall how I made you someone? You used to be a simple shepherd. I chose you. You became the commander of the armies. You won over enemies. You have been installed a king. So, wait, you will make a house for me? I was the one who made you somebody. Instead of you making a house for me, I will give you a house, David, and I will make your kingdom endure forever. The house that God will prepare for David is a kingdom. And that kingdom will be the house of God. Now, on purely political terms, David was probably thinking of his successors, this king who will make the kingdom of David stronger, and the succeeding kings, the successors, who will ensure that the kingdom will last forever. Yes, unfortunately, we know the history. The many kings that succeeded to David were not all good. And that reality evoked in the spiritual sensibilities of Israel a longing for the coming of a messianic king from the house of David. This house that will not only be a royal house, but truly royal, because from that house will come the anointed of God, the true king. This became the hope of Israel. And we know who that king is, Jesus. But look at how Jesus' name did not figure in the gospel, but we see how God was preparing for His coming. It started with a house for God, but it is God who will choose the house. And the house is a people, a family that will be, for the rest of the world, the bearer of the glory of God.
The Lord.
Our second reading on this fourth Sunday of Advent is taken from the letter of Paul to the Romans. We have been reflecting on focusing on Jesus, the one whose birth we are commemorating in a few days. In the first reading from the story of King David from Samuel, we see how the desire of King David to give a house, a fitting house to the Ark of the Covenant, was laudable. Yet God, in a way, reversed the plan of David. Instead of David constructing a house for God, God said, I will construct a house for you. And that house is a kingdom that will be the bearer of God's presence in the people. But we know that somehow the kings of Israel, the house of David, failed God and also the people. And there arose the hope that one day a king from the house of David will be born. And this king is the Messiah, and his kingdom will have no end. So we know who that is, Jesus, the one promised by the Father, the one who would come from the house of David and will be the presence of God. It's not in a house made of cedar, but in a people, and especially in this king called the Messiah. God will be present, God will reign. In the second reading, St. Paul simply repeats what we have already mentioned, but in quite specific terms. He begins with the gospel, and the gospel is about Jesus Christ. But he chooses a more historical approach to the gospel, who is Jesus. He says, first of all, this gospel about Jesus was hidden from all ages, meaning it was already part of the eternal mind, the eternal plan of God. It was hidden in God's mind, in God's eternal will. So, Jesus, the gospel, was already present from all eternity, but hidden to us. But how was it present? In God's mind, in the Father's will. Then, according to St. Paul, that hiddenness was broken when this mystery is now revealed in the writings of the prophets. So we see the prophecies, the prophets who spoke of God's will. They, in a way, gave voice, and some of them put that voice, that word, that promise into writing. So the progressive revelation of God's plan, of the fullness of the gospel, of liberation, of joy. And finally, according to St. Paul, from hiddenness to the proclamation of the prophets, like Nathan in the first reading, comes Jesus in the flesh. He is the gospel. He is born. He is not just part of the eternal existence of God. He is not just someone talked about, even predicted by prophets. He is here in person, in the flesh. And as gospel, He is not just for Israel. He is also for the Gentiles. He is for all and for all ages. Wow, what a beautiful description of who Jesus is. Someone already in the eternal mind of the Father, but slowly and progressively made known. And the scope, He is for everyone and He is for all time. This is the Jesus whom we are welcoming in our midst.
The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel for this Sunday, the last Sunday of Advent, is taken from St. Luke, the account of the Annunciation to Mary by the angel Gabriel. We have been focusing on Jesus. The theme of our reflection, focus on Jesus. Who is He? Who is this poor baby that will be born? Who is He? And we have been blessed with 3 readings that in a way progressively reveal to us the mystery of this humble baby. In the first reading from Samuel, David, who had planned to construct a house for God, the Ark of the Covenant, was assured by God, no, I don't need your house. I will construct a house for you. And the house of David is his family line and also his kingship. In the house of David, God will reside through a messianic king, anointed by the Spirit, who will rule. And through him, God's kingdom will be present for all ages. So it was reversed. Instead of David constructing a house for God, God chooses the house of David to be his dwelling place. And from the line of David, from the house of David, a promised king will be born. And we know who he is. St. Paul, in the second reading, sets for us the whole horizon. The birth of Jesus, the coming of Jesus, actually leads us back to the hiddenness of God's eternal will. Already in God's eternal will, the coming of Jesus was present, but hidden to us. But this mystery got revealed, especially through the prophets. But in the fullness of time, the prophecy became a living person in Jesus. And in Jesus, we see the Savior, not confined only to the house of David or to Israel, but to all, even the Gentiles. So Jesus is King, the one promised by God, not only for Israel, but for all people and for all time. The Gospel of the Annunciation to Mary presents also to us beautiful lessons about getting to know Jesus more deeply. Remember, according to the Gospel, Mary was betrothed to Joseph of the house of David. The house of David in the first reading. So the setting is proper. We are brought back to the house of David. But look at this house. You have a simple woman of Nazareth and a carpenter, Joseph by name. So we are not in a palace. We are not in the room of the rulers. We have now, still in the house of David, a very humble setting. The angel appears to this lowly woman. And look at the message of the angel. She brings to Mary the assurance that she has found favor with God. She is called, just like the other prophets of old, And she has a mission. Through her, the Son of the Most High God will be born. Take a look at that, my dear friends. In the first reading, what was promised was a king. And now the angel is telling Mary that king will be born, for he will rule. He will rule. He will truly be king, and his kingdom will last forever in the house of David. Probably Mary will say, so this child that I am asked to bear will be the fulfillment of the promise to David. But something more. This is not just a king of the house of David. He is the Son of the Most High God. This is not just a human being of a kingly line. This is the Son of God. And to accentuate that, when Mary asked, how could this be? I know not man. The angel Gabriel assured her, the baby will be conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit. So it is not by human intervention that this child will be born. It is by the power of God, because he is fully divine, the Son of God. My dear brothers and sisters, yes, fully human, born of human parents, and also experiencing our humanity, and with a definite line from the house of David. But the expectation of the people Israel was surpassed by God's revelation. It is not just a human king that will be sent. It is the very Son of God. So our regard for Jesus is now complete. He is not just a fulfillment of a promise to a people. He is not just prolonging a human kingdom, an earthly kingdom. He is truly God, the Son of God, but will take a human form. He will be born as a baby, and the kingship of David, now the house of God, will happen in the lowly house of a lowly couple, Mary and Joseph. The way chosen by God to rule is that of humility, is that of hiddenness, is that of simplicity. And that leads me to my final point. The angel Gabriel had long discourses about who this child will be, and when Mary asked the question, the angel also explained at length. But look at Mary. She was intelligent, but a woman of few words. In contrast to the long explanation of the angels, Mary's words were quite scarce. She just said, how could this be? I know not man. A question that is directed to, how can I fulfill God's will? And then after a lengthy explanation by the angel, she just said, this is the servant of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word. Let your will be done. And I'm part of it. Simply that. Let us learn from Mary. How can we be effective participants in the unfolding of this reign of God in the humble babe to be born in Bethlehem, like Mary, who is the new ark of the covenant? Let us be simple and humble. God does not want a palatial dwelling place, a new ark of the covenant with glittering treasures and jewels. He chose a lowly maiden, few in words, but prompt to respond. This humble house called Mary, this humble house called the family of Joseph and Mary, truly of this line of David, will be the fitting house for the Son of the God Most High, who will rule as a simple shepherd. My dear brothers and sisters, let us focus on Jesus with the simplicity, the availability, the promptness of his mother, Mary. Let me end with a story that I told you a year ago already. As we commemorate the anniversary of the coming of Yolanda, I remember asking a catechist from Palo, how would Christmas be celebrated after a typhoon that has caused a lot of loss of lives, property? What would Christmas be like? And she said, maybe for the first time, we will understand the true meaning of Christmas. Nothing is left. Jesus. Jesus. He is Christmas. And He comes not in a big house. Even when houses are destroyed, He comes to us. We are His house, and His love and light will reign in us. Merry Christmas. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.